This is the main question I want to ask you. How does it feel to be lied to so badly? They lied about everything. All their alleged principles turned out to be lies. They never cared about freedom of religion or speech or the right to protest. They never cared about people losing their jobs and being silenced for political reasons. They never cared about cancellations. They never cared about an overreaching government pressuring companies to shut down the platforms of dissenters. They never cared about mass surveillance or a militarized government attacking its own citizenry. Oh, they stoked fears about that happening. They warned us for years. But now that it's finally happening, where are they? They're cheering it on. Liars, phonies, frauds, hypocrites, scoundrels. You know who you are. This will all come to an end one day. And when it does, none of you will be forgotten. To support Trumpism at this late hour, after everything that has been said and done, after all the many attacks he has orchestrated against our own country, under the guise of patriotism, is to be a traitor. You are a traitor if you still support his authoritarian regime at this late stage. Ignorance is no longer an excuse. So, are you complicit or are you not? And to the corporations and organizations bending the knee out of fear, need I remind you that Trump will not be in office forever, and the actions you take now while you're under pressure speak to who you truly are. And we will not forget that either. We will not forget what you did, good or bad, while under this temporary pressure. So what you need to do at this point in your life is weigh short-term comfort against long-term survival. In other words, think about the future. Giving in now might make you complicit to something people will find infamously unacceptable in the future. A permanent blemish on your record, akin to a felony, not as part of some phony, inorganic cancellation, but as genuine disgust in people of conscience. And the things you do now will be cemented in history and will tell everyone who you really are. And whether you like it or not, you will be judged by others. There's no hiding from it. So choose wisely. Make your Faustian bargain if you wish, but accept the consequences of that. You know, when I talk to people and they say, did you know that so-and-so is MAGA? Or I tell them about some influencer, celebrity, or acquaintance that is MAGA, the reaction is always similar to finding out that they have cancer. There's genuine sadness for them. That's a damn shame, we say. It's always hard to find out that someone you know has no principles. And when I say no principles, I mean no principles. Because what's truly remarkable is that Trump is guilty of all the things his supporters claim to oppose. And that's also strong evidence that we're dealing with a cult here, because the leader is beyond reproach, even when he himself commits all the unforgivable sins in the most egregious ways. Excuses are made for him, exceptions are made, and you are attacked as having committed.
How do you feel when you live a life that is a lie for a very long time? How do you feel when you're living a life that is a lie? You're not living your life. You live a life that you don't know who you are. You don't know your identity for a very long time. So you live knowing you're this kind of a person, yet you're this kind of a person. How do you feel? How do you feel living a life that is just a lie? Everything you know about yourself is a lie. Everything you know about your surroundings is a lie. Everything you know about the people around you is a lie. How do you feel after finally realizing that all I've been knowing for all the years that I've been existing in this world was not true? It was just but a lie. How do you feel? You see, that is the situation that some white Americans are going through right now. That is the situation some white Americans are going through right now. I can tell you for a fact, because they never knew they were living a lie. But a time is coming when you now come to realize everything I knew about myself was not real. Everything I knew about people surrounded me wasn't true. Everything I knew about even like other people, other ethnicities, like other race, it was not true. But that is what you have lived knowing for all your life. How do you feel? I want you to listen to this man. This man is really speaking from the heart, trying to express how bad it feels when you live a life that is a lie for all your lives. And finally, at some point in life, you come to realize everything I knew about myself, everything I knew about people surrounded me, everything I knew about my environment, about other ethnicities, about other race was not true. It was all a lie. Take a look at this video. I will come back and say more about it.
Ultimate blasphemy known as Trump derangement syndrome. Why is Trump exempt from their own alleged rules? Because he hurts who they hate. And for some people, hurting their enemies will override any of their professed principles. And I mean that everything about Trump is what many of his most ardent supporters once claimed to hate. He's Hollywood elite, complete with his own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He's a big blue city billionaire who was a Democrat most of his life and was a part of their social circle. He's wildly insecure, weak, and easily offended. He's not a voice for the common man as they try to sell him. He has no idea what it's like to be a common man. Everything has always been done for him. The life of a giant toddler who doesn't know how to do even the most basic things like drive a car or shop for groceries. He cannot relate to you in any way. And not only was he credibly accused of sexual assault 26 times over 4 decades, but he was good friends with over a dozen high-profile pedos and sex offenders and has jumped through absurd hoops to obstruct, cover up, dismiss, and diminish the Epstein files. He released Ghislaine Maxwell to a minimum security prison where sex offenders aren't even allowed, and he even expressed interest in pardoning her. Other prisoners at that facility were transferred to harsher prisons just for speaking badly about her. Let me ask you, how many pedos and sex offenders are you good friends with? And when he came into power, he immediately abused that power, became wildly censorious, caused massive spending and deficits, warmongered, and dropped record-breaking numbers of bombs while claiming to create peace, and even shamelessly claiming that he deserved a Nobel Peace Prize right before sending in troops to attack Americans in cities he considers to be politically opposed to him. And he even openly admitted that it would be good practice for the military. Practice for what, exactly? He bombs civilian vessels, claiming that they're drug dealers, without showing a shred of evidence, as if that's even a crime worthy of being bombed in the first place. He politicizes federal duties that are meant to be neutral, thereby punishing the American people based upon who the majority voted for in a given area. For example, he's defunding energy infrastructure in blue areas to the tune of billions of dollars, which will drive up energy costs for Americans in those states that contribute the most money to the federal government. He denies disaster relief to blue areas, something he falsely accused Biden of doing to red areas, while proudly, openly doing it himself. He's sending in federal agents and red state National Guard to peaceful areas and deliberately stoking conflict, falsely claiming that they're war zones, all so that he can justify more authority. He wants to make blue areas worse places to live so that he can blame it on Democrat leadership. And remember that the man doing this was also a repeat draft dodger who renamed the Department of Defense to the Department of War and appointed a Secretary of War who was nothing more than a National Guardsman. Not to diminish the service people of the National Guard, but for one, a particularly young and inexperienced one, younger than I am, to publicly lecture our experienced wartime generals on the dangers of wokeness is absurd and quite ironic, considering he's perfectly unqualified and proven to be grossly incompetent, something they warned us that DEI would bring. But it wasn't DEI who brought us the unqualified and incompetent. It was Trump, choosing people out of loyalty, whether they'd bend the knee rather than if they were the best person for the job. They claim to desire a meritocracy, but all they really care about is whether you're on their team. Trump has repeatedly committed blatant acts of election interference, has been rightfully charged with RICO violations during the 2020 election, and belongs in prison for doing so, which is exactly where he would have gone if he didn't become the president. He imposes secret police and mass surveillance. Where are you, right-wingers who were against the Patriot Act? And Trump is eliminating the presumption of innocence. Where are all you right-wingers who criticized the Me Too movement's "Believe All Women" slogan because you claimed to believe in the presumption of innocence? Innocent until proven guilty. Everyone deserves a day in court. Everyone deserves to face their accuser. Remember that? All that went right out the window. Now you cheer when ICE invades neighborhoods in Chicago and rounds people up in bulk without even bothering to find out who they are or what they've done, let alone ask for their papers. At least the Nazis asked for papers. We don't even do that anymore. Where are you now? You're proudly announcing that you voted for it. That's where you are. Sold your soul. Sold everything you claimed to be. And for what? And it's all done with the pretense of stopping crime, which is bullshit. You know, I lived in Chicago when it was at its most violent, which was during the early 90s. Crime today is far below what it was back then. And back then, deploying the military as some sort of solution wasn't even thinkable. Yet the crime managed to drop anyway, by more than 50%. That period is known as the Great Crime Drop. Look it up. And it didn't take the military to accomplish it. Now, people are more afraid of the government than of the gangs. Masked men are rounding up Americans and disappearing them, oftentimes based on race alone, but they'll attack anyone. They beat people in the streets for nothing. It's a gang. They're wearing masks and going after people for doxing them, as if that's even a thing for law enforcement. Their names should be right on their chests for all to see. We as Americans should not be programmed to blindly obey any anonymous person who demands it of us. Why do they even think they can get away with such blatant and illegal abuses of power? Well, because they were given explicit permission by the highest office in the land. So who the hell is going to prosecute them? Well, nobody right now, because Trump installed his loyalists. They don't even know how to do their own jobs. All they know how to do is be yes men, follow orders. That's not helping the country. That's endangering it. That's why these masked thugs invading our cities feel safe, zip-tying children in the street, beating random people, attacking anyone who exercises their right to film it, and now even gunning people down. That's why they're not afraid to commit blatant atrocities against Americans on American soil. Anyone who knowingly signs up for that is already the worst of the worst. We're taking people who belong in prison and we're putting them in uniform. And the result is that they are attacking innocent Americans and even children. And they're laughing about it. This is the side that claims to be for family values, by the way. But as I said, that was all a lie. People who still support this have no principles. They lied to you. They didn't want to drain the swamp. They wanted to be the swamp. They weren't outraged. They were jealous. Where are all you people who were against the pandemic overreach? What happened to you? Why aren't you speaking out against this? Where are all you smaller government people? Where are all you states' rights people? I'll tell you where they are. They're supporting it. Because during the pandemic, the policies were affecting them. And that's the only reason they were against it. They can only comprehend that which affects themselves. They're against empathy and will even explicitly say so. But now they believe that the government is only going after other people, illegals or leftists. And that's what they want. So they don't feel like this government overreach will affect them. So they support it. And that's how myopic, selfish, and dumb these people are. And to the masked thugs, remember that when the Nazis were rounding people up, they didn't think they'd be held accountable either. They were in charge. They had ultimate authority over who got rounded up and who got killed. They too were untouchable lords. But that was a very brief moment in time. And just like them, you're not going to be in charge forever. And even though you may feel safe behind your mask, remember that there are still records of everything. You signed up for it using your own name. So just because it isn't known now, that doesn't mean it won't be known later. And so you may find yourself in a courtroom one day, which is a right you stripped from so many others. And if you don't like where they send you, remember where you sent so many others. Remember how you violated their rights. Remember how you terrified people and put them in limbo, put their entire lives on hold. Remember how you laughed about it. When the day comes in which you beg for mercy, ask yourself if those who show no mercy are more or less likely to receive any. But I know that this is falling on deaf ears. You have no principles. 47% of Republicans said that they would still vote for Trump, even if it was proved that Trump was directly involved with Epstein's trafficking of minors. Of the people who voted for Trump in 2024, that's 36 million of them. The law and order people, the anti-pedo people, the family values people. The people who smeared leftists as pedos and groomers just for supporting the LGBT community. The people who claim to care about closing the border because they say they worry about children being trafficked. But if their guy trafficked children or participated in their abuse, then it's okay because he's their guy. He has done more than enough to link himself to sex trafficking and abusing minors, but that doesn't even matter to these people, so there's really nothing you can say to them. Even if Trump were innocent, they already answered the hypothetical. If Trump is guilty, they'd still support him. They've already made the concession, so you can't use logic on them. They don't care about hypocrisy. You can't shame them. They care nothing about morality. How could they? How much worse does it get than sex trafficking children? Yet they're willing to overlook that. Now, maybe some of them questioned it for the length of the typical modern news cycle, but now they're all right back to their usual shameless cheerleading. You see, for them, morality only exists when they feel they've been wronged, but they don't give a damn when anyone else is wronged. For them, morality is just a chess piece that can be used to either attack or be sacrificed for their own benefit. Such people cannot be allowed to shape our society and our future. But that's exactly what they're trying to do right now. And the consequences of that are going to affect us for a very long time if we don't stop it by stripping them of leadership as soon as possible and then dramatically reducing the power of the executive branch, beginning with making it criminally accountable for its actions. Politicians need to start fearing the people again. I am sick and tired of it being the other way around. And if you think that we're not going to win MAGA over by speaking this way, then you're way behind the curve. At this late stage, the ones who were worth winning over have already been won over. As for the rest, you're not going to win them over at all, nor should you want to. They're exactly where they want to be forever and always. I'm not in the habit of capitulating to my opponent's demands on how I should win them over, especially this opponent, because for them, lying is like breathing. They pretend to shift their vote based on being called deplorables or Nazis. Yet when Trump does the same or worse, when he openly claims to hate more than half the country and says he wants them to suffer, his supporters see nothing wrong with it because they're shameless liars. So we shouldn't want to win them over. They should just be politically impotent. Permanently. Now, bear in mind that they remain an extreme minority, with all their gains achieved by manipulating a system that has been abused to the point of uselessness. They are unneeded. Those abuses of the system need to change. Literally every branch of the government needs to be overhauled at this point because our supposed checks and balances clearly aren't working. Congress has succumbed to corruption and pressure, and it's absurd that the traitor in the Oval Office has been able to install a third of the Supreme Court. This is our true national emergency. Your true self comes out when you are being tested, when you are tempted, when you're under pressure, when it becomes costly to stand by your principles. The decisions you make during those moments peel back the layers of camouflage in which you've cloaked yourself to tell others who you are, or even to tell yourself who you are. You think cheating is wrong, but when you're married and a person you find very attractive comes on to you, what do? You're against theft, but you found a wallet full of money and it has identification in it. What do? The people who still support Trump have chosen to go against their professed principles for what they believe will create an advantage for themselves, which is the same as cheating on their spouses or keeping the wallet. There's no more pretending. There's no more lying that they can do. We know they're lying now. All their camouflage is gone. They're naked now. The picture is crystal clear now. All good faith is gone. All trust is gone. No longer can they even pretend to care about pedos or government overreach or overspending or corruption or war, because they supported all of it explicitly. The devil made them an offer and they gladly took it. They can't then turn around and claim to oppose the devil. Oh, they'll clearly deny inconsistencies to your face, even when they're as clear as day, but you simply must reject their testimony now. It's done. It's over. There's nothing they can say. It's all lies now. Simply reject it all as the lies they are. Countless people have been negatively affected by this new political shift in power. They're using up their influence very quickly because people who are motivated by the politics of hurting others never expect their politics to hurt themselves. But that is exactly what always ends up happening. Unfortunately, such people are not usually bright enough to form predictive models in their head so that they realize what bad ideas they have. The only way for them to learn is through the actual negative experience itself. And sometimes they're still not bright enough to learn even then, especially not with all the shifting of blame and bogus scapegoats their masters give them in order to escape accountability. And now we're dealing with a scary escalation because of that failure of imagination. You see, things keep escalating, and we can't survive if we keep going in this direction. We're still on year 1 of this term. The murder of Charlie Kirk was used to justify a dramatic escalation. Now, I can understand thinking that the Kirk murder itself was an escalation, being a politically motivated murder. But it escalated to that point long before that, to the point of shooting and killing Democrat politicians and their families in Minnesota. But that was quickly and absurdly dismissed and shamelessly lied about. It was ignored by Trump and company. Any pageantry and flags at half-mast across the nation was out of the question. There wasn't talk of naming highways after them or putting their faces on money like there was for Kirk, which is absurd, and all fake reverence, by the way. He did nothing to warrant such worship, which is why it all rings so hollow. It's largely performative, as are most politics now. Charlie Kirk was treated very differently than the murdered Democrats because the different political sides capitalize on violence in very different ways. And also because, I believe, because Kirk's murder was caught on camera and was very brutal, which I think makes it more real for people who aren't his friends, family, or acquaintances. I did a recent video called the untold reality of political violence, that explains why the right and the left treat violence so differently, and why there is a huge misconception that the left is more violent, even though that's very much obviously not the case when you actually study all the data and incidents that have occurred over the last 40 or so years. When you look into it, you find that the overwhelming majority of political murders are committed by those who hold to right-wing ideology, specifically white supremacy, which is a lot more likely to become violent since so much of the ideology itself is rooted in fear. The right-wing politicians and influencers, however, desperately want you to buy into a complete inversion of reality. Their narrative needs there to be a violent leftist movement so that they can implement authoritarian policies based on political ideology, which is exactly what the Trump regime is currently trying to do. According to Trump's 7th National Security Presidential Memorandum, or NSPM 7, which gives law enforcement specific areas they are to focus upon. Those specific areas of focus are to investigate anyone who holds extreme views on migration, race, or gender, or anyone they deem anti-Christian or anti-capitalist or anti-traditional American values or anti-American as potential terrorists looking to overthrow the government. And of course, that will be construed as anyone who is anti-Trump, which is especially ironic, seeing as how Trump himself encouraged and then pardoned those who literally, physically, violently attacked the Capitol of the United States, and is now using the military to attack our own citizens. He himself should be investigated under his own memorandum. He's a blatant traitor and a man who is as far from Christ-like as anyone could possibly be. So it's all fake. They don't actually care. They have no real principles other than to do whatever it takes to acquire more power. And they will use whatever pretense they think aids in their acquisition of more power. And believe it or not, Trump himself is anti-American, vehemently so. And that will be hard for some people to see because Trump likes to use the American aesthetic to virtue signal that he is a patriot, when really he is just using his executive power for purely selfish reasons, to enrich himself and his friends and family, and to get what he thinks is revenge on those he has deemed his enemies. But he's against the Constitution and against the American values of freedom. How does the Trump administration define extremist? Well, it doesn't really matter, since they themselves are extremists, so their opinions will be skewed. Because an extremist has distorted views, a person with normal views will look extreme to them. How do they define anti-Christian or anti-American? Doesn't matter. Since it's all about power, they can construe you as either if they want to. If you were ever critical of Christianity, even as a Christian, critical of a particular denomination, or if you were ever critical of capitalism, even crony capitalism, or not just America, but even America's policies or America's past, then perhaps they can accuse you of encouraging violence. Now, you might say that mere disagreements about religion, economics, or America can't possibly be construed as encouraging violence, but consider what Trump has already called encouraging violence. Trump wants to send people who burn their own American flag, their own property, to prison for a year because he says such an act encourages violence, even though the Supreme Court ruled 36 years ago that it's protected free speech. You see, Trump's patriotism is really just hollow performative patriotism that ironically goes against actual American values and does far more harm than the mere burning of a piece of cloth. But what about anti-Christian? According to the First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. I, for one, believe that people should be able to freely and peacefully practice Christianity. I just don't believe the religion itself is true, and I try to convince others of that because I believe that religious thinking leads us exactly to where we are right now. Does that make me anti-Christian? Well, in a way, yes, but most certainly not in a way that advocates violence against Christians, nor the use of any sort of force against them for being Christian. And I'm actually pro-America, meaning that I want America to improve as a society, become more peaceful, prosperous, and facilitate upward mobility for the masses, which obligates me to not support Donald Trump's fascistic, hostile takeover in any way. But what they're trying to do is make the Trump name synonymous with America. Their goal is to make being anti-Trump considered synonymous with being anti-America. Then you can be considered the enemy, an outsider, not a real American. Once you're the enemy from within, as Trump said to the generals, you can be dehumanized. And once you're dehumanized, any matter of atrocity can be committed against you with a clean conscience. That dehumanization includes using the murder of Charlie Kirk to demonize those they deem on the side of the murderer. It doesn't matter how far removed you are from the murderer or his politics. You see, it's all about power. If you're against Trump, then you are the enemy, and you will inherently be considered as belonging to the side, not the man who killed Charlie Kirk. They want to collectivize the blame. They did this. They did that. They tried to assassinate Trump. They killed Charlie Kirk. That's how they present the rhetoric. And since you are a part of they, you essentially played a role in killing Charlie Kirk. That's the goal of the rhetoric. Guilt by association, whether you can legitimately be associated or not. Because once you can be deemed a violent radical, all kinds of extreme acts can be justified against you. The falsehood that you are somehow complicit will be used to intimidate you into silence. What we're witnessing right now is not just an escalation of violence, but also the use of that violence to justify an escalation of harmful labels and actions. You can be a humanist who desires nothing but peace and prosperity, like I do, yet be investigated as a terrorist nonetheless. That's your new label, terrorist. Because if you as a political enemy can be called terrorists, then you can also become part of the war on terror, which means that the full capabilities of the United States can be leveraged against you. Illegally, of course, but that doesn't matter to this new regime. This law and order regime does nothing but disregard law and order, just like everything else.
Right, welcome back again. A white man lived a life that was a lie. And this one was also tried to be pulled to the black community. Now, after a very long time, the black people who were denied their history, to whom their history was hidden from them, it got to a point when they started realizing that, this is what we were supposed to know, or this is what or who we are. You see, a white man, on the other hand, they also lived a lie because they were lied on many things. Because people wanted to keep power. People wanted to stay superior. People wanted to be the leaders, to be the kings. And for them to be the kings, and this was because of the selfishness, because of their political gains, and many other things. And so they had to sacrifice the identities of a lot of white Americans. They had to sacrifice the identities of many people so that they can be able to remain in power, so that they can be able to remain relevant, even when they were irrelevant for a very long time. So they decided what we can do right here, right now, is to make sure that the people we are leading or the people existing, we have denied them a chance or an opportunity to know who they really are, to understand themselves. Are you getting me? And for years, the white Americans and the white people did not know who they really are. They lived a life that never belonged to them. They lived a lie. You see, you live knowing that you own a car for years. Kumbe, the car you own isn't yours. You live knowing I own a house for years. You walk around bragging around when you have a house and a land and everything. And at the end of the day, you come to realize all those things you claimed you owned were not belong to you. You live knowing that your neighbor is poor. Your neighbor has always been bewitching you, that your life is miserable because of your neighbor. You see, your life is miserable because of your neighbor who performs witchcrafts. That is what your parents are telling you. And then you live hating the neighbors. You live hating them. You live having that anger with them for years. And then one day you come to realize, so everything I was told about my neighbor was a lie. You lived knowing that when your mother gave birth to you, your father threatened, like when your mother was pregnant, your father threatened to kill your mother, so your mother escaped. Yeah. So when you're now growing up, you keep on asking, where is my father? And your mother is telling you your father was a criminal. And then one day you come to realize your father was not a criminal, your mother was a cheater. And so your father caught her cheating on him, and then he divorced her. But all your life you lived hating your father. You see, these kind of things, these kind of narratives, I'm trying to bring them up to show you how painful it is to live a lie. And that is why we always say an American government or these great white empires, they've been built on lies. Not only on genocide, not only on atrocities, but also on lies where people lived lives that didn't belong to them. They lived a certain life they never thought, it was. Like, for example, the most painful part is when you've been living this kind of a life for a very long time. And then one day you come to realize, oh, so I was living just a lie. This wasn't what I was supposed to be living. You were taught about the black people in a certain way. You are taught about your lives and generations in a certain way. You are taught about your existence in a certain way. You are taught about your governments in a certain way. You are told to remain calm and be patient, you see, even when you are suffering, because you are made to believe this suffering is necessary. You are made to believe you are the greatest there is, the greatest there was, and the greatest there will ever be. You are made to believe you are superior. You are made to believe there is nobody who is above you. You come to realize you are about to be the least person. Yeah? You are taught that other people are bad, other people are not good. And you lived a lie. You didn't know where you came from. You are made to believe you came from a place that you never came from. You are made to believe you are a kind of a person that you were not. And so, it really feels bad when people live a lie. living lives that doesn't belong to them. And this white man is trying to say the truth here, that we should be warned, not only as white people, but also as black people and every other person. Because people are doing things out here to make themselves relevant or to achieve some things. They are willing to go to any extent to achieve some things in life. They are willing to go to any extent to achieve some things in life. You see, it doesn't matter whether you live better or you don't live better, but they're willing to tamper with your life. They are willing to frustrate you. They are willing to make you lose hope in life. They are willing to make your life miserable. But at the end of the day, they're doing it only to make themselves better or to get their hands to some things. And that is why people feel bad when they come to realize finally they lived a lie. White Americans lived a lie. The life they lived wasn't their lives. They were told that black people did not have a culture, and therefore black people copied the culture of the white people. And whoever told them that ended up hiding the history of the black people. So they couldn't get hold of the history of the black people. They ended up believing they lent a culture to the black people and many other things. And so after they are coming to realize, oh, so we've been living a lie all our lives, they feel so bad. They feel so frustrated. Yeah? And we need to be very cautious. The white Americans also who are existing today, they need to stop these things from happening and stop it from going on and becoming better people so that they cannot no longer be manipulated. They can no longer be deceived anymore, any longer. Are you getting me up to there? But tell me what you think of the comment section. I will do my best to make sure I read all the comments and give a response where possible. I am the African Streamline. Thanks for coming. Thanks for always watching. I really appreciate. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to share. Don't forget to like and press notification bell. Be the first person to get every news as it comes in. Adios.